Today on Listen Up, marriage under fire. Concluding that rings and vows don't really matter, but do they? That's next. Welcome to Listen Up. I'm Lorna Dueck. Today we're bringing you an inside scoop on some interviews we've done on marriage. The concept conjures up white weddings and happiness ever after. Or does it? For many, it's a tough reality ending in broken hearts and broken families. And we tackle just why marriage is so tough and what can be done to make it better. Take a look. Infidelity, spousal abuse, just plain falling out of love. Some 4 out of every 10 marriages in North America end in divorce today. So perhaps it's not surprising that the number of couples choosing to say "I do" is declining, and the number of couples who live together is on the rise. In Canada and parts of the United States, marriage has recently undergone a complete redefinition, giving same-sex couples the legal right to marry. Meanwhile, polygamy appears to be the next hurdle facing traditional marriage. Legal experts say the current polygamy ban in Canada could fall to a constitutional challenge based on religious freedom. Well, while we all celebrate those marriages who can endure for decades, experts are saying it's time we celebrate every stage of marriage, and we'll take you to activists who are doing their part to ensure we re-educate about the value that marriage has for our culture and for our personal happiness and that of our children. And we'll hear from one couple who says living together almost destroyed their marriage before it even got started. And we'll hear from a celebrated Canadian entertainer on how she pulled her marriage back from the brink of disaster. It's quite a story. You'll want to stay with us. But first, just how intense have the culture wars over marriage become? In Western society, marriage has traditionally been between one man and one woman, but that's no longer a given. And as society struggles with what marriage should look like in the future, experts say it's a struggle that's taking on epic proportions.
Well, right now, the battle on marriage is very intense. People on both sides feel very, very strongly about it. And by both sides, I mean those who believe, as I do, in the traditional definition of marriage as the conjugal union of a man and a woman. And those on the other side are people who think that marriage should be redefined.
It's an extraordinary time. You know, here we have this thing that every small tribe in Africa or South America, they all knew how to get men and women together to make and raise the next generation in this thing called marriage. And suddenly every single developed country, the places that are otherwise the best for human flourishing, you know, advanced economies and stable democracies and rule of law, every single one of them has a crisis around marriage and family.
But the world has changed, say some. Shouldn't marriage? And why should it matter to us anyway? Doesn't it all come down to a matter of freedom of choice and individual rights?
I care about marriage because it's fundamental to elevating human beings. All of us depend on the institution of marriage to carry forward a civilization, to raise children who are decent, who are secure, who are given a chance for really an honorable and worthy life. Marriage is fundamental to every society. Every society has something like marriage, and there's a reason for that.
We don't know of any society in the long term that's managed to survive without a reasonably well-functioning marriage culture.
Marriage is the essential, fundamental, best, original Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. It does what no government could possibly do. It does what no business corporation, no matter how efficient, could possibly do. Every other sector of society, government, the economy, you name it, relies on their being basically honest, responsible, disciplined, honorable people, but no institution can produce such beings except the family. And family is built on marriage.
Government is involved in marriage. Marriage is different from a romantic relationship in part because it has tangible consequences. So, I mean, government is certainly involved when marriages don't happen, because government is paying for and regulating the lives of families. They're going to fathers who are not married and they're ordering them to pay child support. They're telling mothers when their children must visit their fathers. I mean, you want government involved in your family life. Get a divorce or don't get married. And government is going to be involved in heavily regulating every aspect of your family life, and taxpayers are going to pay for it.
The whole community has to support marriage. Marriage is not a private issue. This is a mistake a lot of people make. They think that marriage is a private matter. No society in the history of mankind has ever been foolish enough to treat marriage as a private matter.
The impulse to marriage that's written on every human heart is a desire for a lasting union that means something, not only to yourself, not only inside myself, but has an impact. It means something to my friends, to my family, to my partner, to my children in the larger society. And ultimately for religious people, you know, it's grounded in a sense that this is what God wants us to do. But marriage exists in every known society, whether you're religious or not.
When we return, when the going gets tough, the tough go for help, how marriage mentoring could save your relationship. But first, let's take it to the street. What do you think makes a great marriage?
A lot of sex.
Are you married yourself?
Yeah.
So, and are you happy?
Yeah.
Great. And why do you think the divorce rate is so high, 1 out of every 2?
Not enough sex.
Just to spend more time, get to know the person, don't rush into it. I guess sometimes you have to rush into certain religions, but other than that, just take your time, see how it goes. Don't worry.
I think you really have to be happy and satisfied with who you're with, not just take a relationship for what it is. I know when I was younger, it was get married because that's what you had to do. And I think now that you're older, you think about it, and if you don't want to be with that person, don't.
There's more to listen up than what you see on TV. Check out our website. You'll find blogs to comment on, questions to answer, polls to take, and clips to watch. Pay us a visit and tell us what you think. Is marriage still relevant? You'll find us at listenuptv.com. It's called Marriage Savers, a U.S.-based approach to driving down divorce rates, cohabitation rates, and making marriage beautiful. Is it working? Take a look. 43 years, that's how long Mike and Harriet McManus have been married. It's a number they delight in, and a number that gives them the authority to speak out on the issue of marriage. And that they do. The couple are co-chairs of Marriage Savers, a U.S. organization helping communities cut divorce rates and raise their marriage rates.
Mike and I feel that the greatest gift our generation can give the next generation is a high-functioning, healthy, happy, long-term marriage. Because a good marriage is contingent on so many other things. And I think that when you have a couple who is simply a happily married couple, we're sitting on a wealth of wisdom and a wonderful an array of marital resources, even though we would never think of it in those terms. But we know, practically speaking, what makes a marriage work and what makes it not work. And so we're walking around with this great big toolbox of unused skills that we can pass on to the next generation.
Meet the next generation, Cale and Stacy Williams.
At that time when we first started living together, we were sexually intimate, yes. We moved in probably, I would say about almost a year before the wedding. And it was because, well, we had made a decision to get married. Why not just save on expenses?
It's a decision increasing numbers of couples make every year. Whether for convenience, cost savings, or a desire to simply try things out, more people are foregoing the formalities of marriage in favor of simply living together.
In this country, we have gone from 3/4 of our adults being married to less than 50%. And the key reason that is that we have diverted tens of millions of people from getting married because they thought they could test it in cohabitation. But when you're in cohabitation, it's all on scale of if and then. If you make me happy sexually, then I might marry you. If you are a good cook, then I might marry you. And so it's all tentative. The commitment is not real commitment. They say they're in a committed relationship, they're not. And couples who have lived together before they marry are 50% more likely to divorce than those who have never lived together.
We are talking about extremes, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. You know, it's easy to love somebody and be happy and satisfied during the health and the good and the better. But let's talk about the sickness and the poor and the bad times. That's the time when we really, I think, have a wonderful opportunity. It may not appear wonderful at the moment, but it's a wonderful opportunity to just show your partner and yourself just what kind of grit you are as a partner. Marriage is not for sissies.
Kale and Stacy found that out the hard way.
Well, one thing that we learned early in cohabitation was that we were two very strong-willed people, and we didn't have any tools to resolve those conflicts. We were still preparing for the wedding, we were still living together, and it was a challenge being under that same roof with someone while you're trying to learn them, while you're trying to prepare for a marriage.
Mike has some strong opinions about marriage. A former correspondent for Time magazine, he's the author of Marriage Savers, helping your friends and family avoid divorce. He's a firm believer in the value of mentoring young couples in the art of marriage.
Harriet and I have been a mentor couple with other couples for 15 years. We have worked with 60 couples as volunteers in our own church. We trained mentor couples in our own church to do this work. And we have trained about 4,000 mentor couples in scores of communities across this country. What the mentor couple can offer is the wisdom of a well-lived life, a well-lived marriage.
Do you think your marriage would have lasted if you hadn't done that kind of homework?
No, honestly, I don't think we probably would have gotten married, period, if we had not gone through the mentor couple program.
We went there saying, okay, we're going to get us one more shot. And I think we walked away saying, all right, we've been able to come to an agreement and we're going to make this happen.
As the McManuses shared their lives with the Williams through the mentoring relationship, they shared something else. Their conviction that building the best marriage takes more than faith in each other, it takes faith in God.
So if you let God in and you let God lead, He's already laid out the example. And so for us, it was not only submitting to one another, but lowering ourselves and actually saying, okay, maybe this is something we can't handle. Let's turn it over to God. Let's pray about it. Let's figure out some type of way to get through it.
To me, the difference that faith makes in a marriage is the difference between watching television in black and white and watching television in color. I mean, you just aren't seeing with all of your facilities and your faculties. And I think people who have that choice of believing or not believing deprive themselves of something wonderful that's going to make their relationship, their marriage more.
When we return, a Canadian star who shared the stage with Jim Carrey, Shania Twain, Reba McEntire, and Kalita says she was always looking for love. She found it, but it was no fairy tale. That story when we come back.
There will be joy. Be strong, take heart. All those.
Closed captioning provided by Duca Financial Services Credit Union. Discover more affordable banking at duca.com.
We love getting your calls, voicemails, emails, video clips, and letters. Pop by our website and answer this week's question. Your marriage, what made it? What broke it? Or what keeps it going? Write to us at listenuptv.com. Listen Up is back looking at the challenge to pull a marriage together. And our next guest is one who, when she sings, people listen.
Praise Him, praise the Lord.
Her songs tell stories of love, and she's been through it all. Her second marriage began with an emotional affair and would have heartbreaking consequences. Kalita joins us now to talk about why.
Well, my parents had a really rough time through their marriage, and they ended up separating. And after they separated, my father committed suicide 6 months later. So, you know, the whole separation and divorce thing was devastating in my life as a kid. So going into my first marriage, you know, I didn't have any role models, God, Jesus, a church family. That wasn't even part of my world. And so my husband and I both came from backgrounds that were very unstable. And so we both came into the marriage like really so unhealthy in so many ways, and in many ways it was doomed.
You leave the first husband not long after you're married. Gord, your new husband, begins an affair that lasts 2 years. What did you grapple with as you realized the truth that was hitting you?
Well, there were a few things I had to grapple with. First of all, the focus was on me. How could someone do this to me? Of course, I was devastated, and the other person involved in the triangle was actually a very good friend of mine. So it was like a double betrayal. But at the same time, I had to look at myself, honestly, and think of what I had done to my first husband. You know, and those were things that I had to work out inside of myself and work those out with God.
Let's talk about starting to bring God into such a messy relational problem. How does it happen for you?
Well, in my first marriage, God didn't exist in my life. I mean, I believed in God, but there was no relationship with Him. I never went to church except for a wedding or a funeral. But it was a few months into my relationship with Gord that we started looking for a church to attend. I had given my life back to God a couple of months prior to that, because I ended up in the bottom of a ditch in an automobile accident, and that really was a turning point for me. It's when I left my marriage, it's when I came back to God in a huge way. And so we were looking for something. I knew that I was following God, and Gord was, he knew that there was something missing in his life. So as two people who were now, I would say a couple, we started looking for a church. And we happened to find a church. It was a little Baptist church, and it was at that church that we learned that we shouldn't be living together if we wanted to be on the worship team. That if we were going to live together, then, you know, perhaps I needed to think about, you know, dissolving my first marriage legally. And so, I mean, it was a tricky situation, you know. But we did go ahead, and I was able to get a divorce, and then we ended up getting married. And really, this little church, I mean, it was such a foundation for us in starting our marriage.
I want to take you to this marriage that hit such a rocky time. So your marriage with Gord begins to completely unravel over the adultery. Why did you decide to make it work, to say, I'm not going to give up?
Well, I think because I did not want to be a failure. I did not want to be a single mother, because we had our child 1 year after our first, 1 year after we got married. We had a baby now, and I didn't want to be a single mother, and I didn't want to be a failure. And I knew deep down inside of me, I really knew that God had put Gord and I together. I really felt strongly about that, as absurd as it might seem, you know, leaving one husband and rushing into this new marriage. I really sensed God was in it, that there was something there. And so I really fell more in love with Jesus. I went to Him. I felt like, what else do I have in my life at this point? And I handed everything over to Him. And I remember specifically having this banner that was like in my head, and it said, faith, have faith. And I just pressed into that, and I called out to God. I looked to Him. He was everything to me, and He is the one that pulled me through. And He is the one, more than anything, that gave me the unconditional love for Gord. See, once I found out about the affair, I mean, things had been going on for a long time. I suspected, everything in me was telling me one thing, but people were not telling the truth.
Tell me about forgiving him.
You know, forgiveness, I can't believe what a gift it is. When you accept your responsibility, it can be such a huge release and such a huge gift. And what I mean by that is that I did not do it on my own. I asked God for forgiveness, and He gave it to me. He put something in my heart that allowed me to forgive my husband.
And you do believe it's your commitment to God that saved your marriage?
Totally.
When we return, my personal thoughts on making marriage last in the wrap. If you missed last week's show, go to our website. You'll find all of this season's programs archived there for viewing. And while you're there, take our poll or drop us a line. You'll find us at listenuptv.com. As we worked on this marriage show, a wise person in our office said, marriage is not about falling in love, it's about walking in love. Nice. In our 29 years of marriage, walking in love has had plenty of chances to trip up. And I can tell you what made it work for me. Walking with a third person in the marriage, the person of Jesus Christ. A spiritual truth which has affected our physical reality. Some of the same principles of getting to know and adapt to a husband apply to getting to know and adapt to Jesus. Asking to have Jesus live with you, in you, has been a pursuit. Nearly every day I've had to make an effort to have an exchange of personhood, change how I naturally react. What Jesus brings to that equation is much better than what I bring on my own. Adding spiritual truth to marriage goes the distance, not just for falling in love, but for walking in love. For Listen Up Television, I'm Lorna Duick. Thanks for watching.
Following the Faith in Obama show, Marilyn wrote, President Obama does inspire me. He is about making a difference. Even the inauguration was more about the people and sharing this historical moment with as many as possible. Write to us with your news and views at listenuptv.com.